Meeting number 19 of the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. Before we begin, we don't have any in-person participants, so I'll skip that part. Pursuant to the routine motion adopted by the committee, I can confirm that all witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of this meeting. Please wait until I recognize you by name. Before you speak, all comments should be addressed through the chair. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by this committee on Wednesday, November 5th, 2025, the committee is meeting to study the effects of influencers and social media content on children and adolescents. And like I said, we have 6 witnesses with us online today, starting with Perry Mason. Yes, in Hamilton, we have a detective named Perry Mason, not a crack defense lawyer, but impressive all the same. Good to see you again, sir. Tiana Sharifi from the Center for Exploitation Education is here with us. Dimitri Pavlounis from Civics. Yves Tessier-Bouchard from Les Coups de l'Information. Stacey Hansen from Saskatoon Public Schools. And André Côté from the DAIS at Toronto Metropolitan University. Welcome to all. We will give each of you 5 minutes for an opening statement. We're going to start with you, Mr. Mason. You now have the floor for 5 minutes. Go ahead. Oh, did you hear me? Was that clear? Okay, you're looking for your mute button. Full disclosure, Mr. Mason is occupying my constituency office today because he didn't have adequate.
I'm keeping your chair warm.
Very good. Excellent office you have there. Sir, you have the floor for 5 minutes for an opening statement. You can start anytime.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here. I'd like to talk about the crisis of misunderstanding. I'm here today because I see the crisis through a unique trifocal lens. I'm a grandfather raising a digital native. I'm a former school resource officer who watched the digital transition hit our schools. But perhaps more importantly, my neurodivergence grants me a specific strength, pattern recognition. I don't just see incidents, I see the meta patterns connecting, for me, the last 30 years of youth culture. I'm here to report something simple and perhaps uncomfortable. The map we adults may be using may be wrong. To explain the mistake I think we're making, I have to take you north. I had the distinct privilege of visiting the Cree Nation in northern Quebec twice to facilitate restorative justice circles. I was even honored to speak on CBC Cree radio. When I arrived, I had to check my assumptions. To an outsider, these communities look isolated. But when I sat in those circles, when I engaged with curiosity instead of judgment, I didn't find isolation. I found a vibrant, self-sustaining culture operating on a frequency the South often fails to tune into. They weren't lost, they were sovereign. This is a lesson I apply to our children. Our youth have migrated to a new territory. They have their own language, their own culture, their own economy. And just as we fail when we try to regulate cultures that we don't understand, I think we're failing to regulate the digital generation, I believe called Gen Z, because we, I think, refuse or are unable to learn their language. To prove how borderless this reality is, let me tell you what my grandson watches or has watched. Visualize a standard influencer vlog, upbeat music, slick editing, a young woman laughing while eating ice cream. Now the reveal, she's broadcasting from North Korea. To my generation, North Korea means nuclear threat. To his generation, it's just another channel. He doesn't see propaganda, he sees content. He admires her not because she supports a regime, but because she knows how to beat the algorithm and evade the restrictions. He respects the hacker ethic, for lack of a better term. That's the reality gap. We see a dictatorship. He sees a creator winning the game. I guess a good term to call him and others is a digital sovereign. We assume these kids are victims. A couple of nights ago, I sat down with my 22-year-old grandson for a 2-hour, unfiltered, and to be frank, unexpected conversation, and he corrected me. He told me he hasn't failed a launch. He built an e-commerce business. He's traveled to Europe. He's lived in penthouses and sailed on yachts. And he told me, I can go back to that luxury whenever I want. Right now, the value proposition's here. He's a digital sovereign, physically present, but socially and economically, he's living on a plane this committee may not even have mapped, perhaps. But here's the critical but. The digital sovereignty comes with a loss of consequences. In the real world, words have weight. In their world, words are noise. Slurs become punctuation. Morality becomes an algorithmic score. Because nothing seems to stick, they become uniquely vulnerable to predators. I know this darkness personally through my relationships with Carol Todd, Amanda Todd's mother, and Leah Parsons, or Taya Parsons' mother. The danger isn't that kids are wasting time. The danger is that they are being groomed in a world where the rules of real life don't apply. When a predator tells a child, I'm the only one who gets you, the child believes it because we have stopped trying to understand them. My message is simple. You can't regulate a reality that you may not understand fully. You try to legislate safety from the outside, you'll fail, perhaps. The only way to protect them is to do what I did with my grandson. Drop the judgment, enter with curiosity, translate, don't punish. Finally, I want to be transparent about how these remarks were prepared. As a neurodivergent thinker with ADHD, my mind works in patterns and curiosity, but struggles with linear culture. To prepare for today, I used artificial intelligence, not to generate my ideas, but to organize them. I supplied the lived experience. The AI supplied the executive function. I share this for a reason. I use the tools of the digital sovereign to communicate with this committee. If a grandfather can partner with a machine to be understood, surely we can find a way to connect with the generation that lives inside it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll turn now to Tiana Sharifi from the Center for Exploitation Education. Go ahead. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Tiana Sharifi. I'm the founder and CEO of the Center for Exploitation Education, specializing in child and youth sexual exploitation prevention. I've been a subject matter expert for over a decade. I'm a mother, and I come in with a unique angle. I'm in many ways an influencer myself. I've built a large online following on social media where my educational content has reached millions of families it wouldn't have otherwise, and has saved lives of young people who've directly reached out for help. Not all social media platforms are created equal because they vary in different levels of risk. Some are proactive about child safety and want their platforms to be used for good, and others have no intention other than to monetize off of their users and consumers. For those of us working in the anti-sexual exploitation field, the largest threats to the well-being of children online are unmistakably clear. First, influencer culture is feeding the sexualization and exploitation of youth. Second, boys are being pulled into harmful gender beliefs that normalize violence and predation. And third, grooming, sextortion, and child sexual abuse materials are rising as offenders operate freely online. I want to begin with the first. Influencers today have an enormous impact. Many create helpful content for adults, and as a whole, they're not inherently harmful. However, the problem is that with the influencers that children follow, they're not entirely appropriate for them. Young people look to influencers to understand gender norms, relationships, sexuality, and even what level of objectification is considered normal, and this is inherently harmful. Influencer culture has also normalized the commodification of people. Young girls in particular are being turned into products economically, not metaphorically. They see bodies, intimacy, and personal lives monetized, teaching them that people can be bought, sold, and consumed. This normalization has consequences. I have seen students being groomed into the idea of participating in OnlyFans and sugar dating. And of course, the moment they turn 18, we're just going to suddenly label that participation as consent. Now, at the same time, boys are learning who they're supposed to be as men, and they're learning it from some of the worst voices online. I've noticed a sharp shift in young boys when I give presentations, and I now hear rhetorics such as girls must be submissive and that rejection is disrespect. These are messages straight from the manosphere, which includes incel communities, male supremacy, and anti-feminist influencers who package misogyny as empowerment for our young boys. These ideologies are reaching our boys at the exact moment that they are forming their identities. And if you are a boy and you create an account on pretty much any social media platform, the content you received is engineered to be shocking, violent, and misogynistic. And so boys are being shaped by these predators, misogynists, and extremists, telling them that aggression equals confidence and empathy equals weakness. And this content is not coming from obscure corners of the internet, it's coming from the mainstream platforms themselves. And these same algorithms that are pushing sexualized content to girls and misogynistic content to boys are the algorithms that are making grooming faster, easier, and more scalable for predatory people. Grooming, image-based abuse, and sextortion are skyrocketing, as we know, because offenders no longer need to seek opportunity. The platforms are creating it for them. Many platforms use misleading language that creates a false sense of security for kids. Snapchat's For Your Eyes Only folder, Instagram's vanish mode suggest privacy, secrecy, and control, when in reality, these features make exploitation easier and detection harder. And some apps are even predatory by design, encouraging kids to swipe to meet strangers or interact with AI bots that initiate sexual conversations. We cannot keep asking children and parents to navigate a system that was never designed for their safety. The government must work with the platforms. And if a platform refuses to engage, it should lose access to the Canadian market, period. My key recommendations include having monetary consequences for platforms that fail to comply with Canadian regulations, straightforward and quick reporting channels with time restrictions on response times, liability held on the platforms, and mandated minimum age requirements and enforced age verifications, to say the least. I have a number of others, but I know that I'm short on time.
You still had 20 seconds, but hopefully we continue this study today. We'll turn now to Dimitri Pavlounis from Civics. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Dimitri Pavlounis. I'm the research director at Civics. We are a national civic education charity dedicated to building the habits and skills of citizenship. We work primarily with K-12 teachers from every province and territory, providing free programs in both English and French. We're best known for our flagship Student Vote program, but we provide many other programs around civic engagement, civic discourse, and digital media literacy. So over the last while, you've heard about many different social challenges, each intersecting with social media in distinct ways. Some of these challenges might be best addressed through regulation. Others might require support or education frameworks. Many likely need both. So while I will focus today on the need for media literacy education, I want to be clear that we don't see this as the only or even the best solution to all of these challenges. Rather, we see it as an essential part of a broader national strategy to help young Canadians navigate their online lives. Now, media literacy is, of course, a large umbrella term encapsulating many different concepts and competencies. But at Civics, we approach digital media literacy as a necessary component of informed citizenship. And our digital literacy program teaches empirically supported skills that have been shown to significantly increase students' ability to navigate information and make more informed judgments about the content they see online. So this, of course, includes discerning between true and false, but it also involves navigating all of the agenda-driven, polarizing, or manipulative material that blurs that line between true and false, and that reflects much of what we and young people actually encounter online. So since the program launched, over 8,000 teachers have registered and over 4,000 have attended one of our training workshops. And so today I want to share 4 things we have learned that help explain kind of the current state of digital literacy education and what we believe is needed to better support youth in the future. So first, the good news is that this is not primarily a curricular problem. While curricula could certainly be strengthened and streamlined, media literacy is already curriculum in every province and territory in Canada. The problem, at least when it comes to teaching information evaluation, is that just because something is curriculum does not guarantee that it is prioritized or being taught effectively. And as a case in point, in our study of over 2,300 students from across Canada, we found that many students are being taught methods that either don't work or that backfire in practice. And these findings align with research from elsewhere, including research in the US context from Stanford. And I want to be clear, this is not the fault of teachers. Much of this content is brand new to them, and educators often lack support to keep up with best practices, especially within a rapidly shifting media landscape. Most importantly, many ineffective methods still routinely appear in resources directed at educators, which just muddy the waters and cause confusion. Second, even if our focus is on addressing the disinformation problem, we cannot focus on discernment alone. Media literacy education in all forms must address the social emotional factors that make people susceptible to misleading and harmful messaging. Information on social media doesn't exist in a vacuum, and people don't typically incorporate information into their mental models simply because they are exposed to it, but rather because it resonates with them authentically or fulfills some emotional or cognitive need. As such, it's not enough to just teach young people how to discern credibility. They must also have authentic opportunities to reflect on how the content they see online produces meaning and how, true or not, harmful or not, it may appeal to our cognitive biases and contribute to our sense of identity or community. These essential conversations could and should happen in many spaces, including the home and in schools where they can occur with trusted adults in safe and structured ways that are already supported by existing curricula. Third, no amount of media literacy education can make up for a rapidly eroding media ecosystem. National efforts grounded in evidence-based practices are essential, but these efforts are futile without a healthy information environment to support them. Social media regulation alone won't improve conditions without significant investments in accessible, high-quality information that is meaningful and relevant to the lives of Canadian youth. And finally, I want to advocate for including the voices of young people in your consultations and decision-making. Currently, I'm supporting a student-led project in New Brunswick on AI and education, and these high schoolers, like youth across the country, care deeply about the impacts of technology on their lives. Most importantly, their lived experiences provide insights that cannot be communicated through statistics, survey results, or adult voices. If we are concerned that young people are turning to social media in part because they are disillusioned with our democratic institutions or with traditional forms of expertise, inviting them into these conversations about one of the defining civic issues of their lives can go a long way to building trust and can lead to better policy outcomes. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. Prochainement, on a Eve Tessier-Bouchard.
Next, we will hear from Eve Tessier-Bouchard, editor from Les As de l'Information. You have 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much for this invitation to share this with the committee, dear chair and members of the committee. Currently, I head the only French-speaking newspaper called Les As de l'Info for children. It's specifically addressed to children between 8 and 12 and explains the news to them every day on a website. As of today, there are exactly 26,291 registered users on our free website. We are not exactly a social network like the ones we're talking about today. However, we are a safe community where children are protected by a pseudonym or an avatar, and where they can learn, exchange ideas, comment, give their opinions in all different types of means. Les As de l'Info, therefore, is a small social network for information that is moderated 7 days a week. We ask for parental consent upon registration, and we foster an atmosphere of respect on the site while encouraging our young students, most of whom are still in elementary school, to express their critical thinking skills. It's a free site. Of course, it takes a great deal of effort to fund it, but we insist on it because it opens up all of the doors for all curious children who want to learn, because their opinion is key. We want to provide notions of digital citizenship and information, especially want to interest them in becoming involved as little citizens. And I'd like to bring a parenthesis. They are not tomorrow's citizens. They're young, but they're already members of our society, and they have to be included in the conversation. In fact, we did a Léger poll with the 8 to 12-year-old group in 2024, and the children at 60% told us that the government did not often consider children before it made decisions. And 66% of them felt that they could advise the government. You've been warned. They also we want them to have a sense of competence that enables them to be little pollinators of good information and environments. You met Marie-Eve Carignan last week from UNESCO Prep Chair, who spoke about a study we conducted in collaboration, which indicates to us that yes, children can become leaders in the fight against misinformation if they're well supported, if they're confident, and if they understand the issues. We know that 25% of children say they have an account on at least one social network. For this age group, the 8-year-olds, it is often YouTube and TikTok. We can therefore say that it is part of their lives. So our collective concern should be, as far as we're concerned, how we can support them in discovering and using these tools that are part of their time. How can we prevent them from becoming digitally illiterate while protecting them from negative content, conspiracy theories, or content that could lead them to radicalization? Our position at the L'As de l'Info, when faced with this vast question of the influence of social media on young people, is completely aligned with the importance of education, supporting children and teens, and supporting them and the availability of a verified content online. Because yes, we do know that when used properly, social media can be a tool, and they are complicated by our task, but the discoverability of reliable content is facing major obstacles as well. So investing in information literacy as the information cooperatives that support Les As de l'Info organization is not easier for the media here, which is struggling financially. So is the solution to outright ban social media for young people, as some countries are doing? Do we need greater oversight, a more restrictive security barrier at the entrance to social media? Perhaps certain age categories for young people? Or do we need significant investment in digital education for young people and digital education starting in early childhood? As far as I'm concerned, and for us who's been working youth content for 35 years, and for the mother and grandmother that I am, education and helping young people to develop skills is key. It's more important than a ban. You have to be able to develop skills to navigate, to be a good captain and avoid pitfalls. So both on the water and on the web. Thank you very much.
Merci à vous. Next, we have
Thank you very much.
from Saskatoon Public Schools. I can probably guess who invited you here.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Stacey Hansen. I'm a high school counselor. The concerns I'm sharing today are from counselors and restorative action program facilitators across Saskatoon public secondary schools, and they reflect patterns we see regularly, not isolated incidents. Our first concern is around targeted online harassment. In one case, a group of students manipulated a video in which they provoked a conflict, edited out their role, and posted only the victim's retaliation to frame him as a racist. The online hate became so severe that he feared for his safety, carried a weapon to school, and ultimately transferred schools and changed his name. Targeted harassment also includes coordinated social exclusion. Group chats and Snapchat stories are used to incite entire peer groups against a single person or student. Students create warning pages about socially vulnerable peers, spreading accusations without evidence. The speed, reach, and public nature of these attacks magnifies the harm far beyond what was possible before social media. In one case, the victim of this harassment took his own life. We also see teens impersonating other students and even teachers by creating fake accounts. These accounts post troubling images or messages that damage reputations, causing embarrassment, shame, and significant mental health impacts. Online harassment now extends far beyond traditional bullying. A common solution we recommend is for students to block the person targeting them. But teens have learned to circumvent this. They create new accounts, new group chats, or have friends add the victim back into conversations. Blocking no longer stops the behavior. In fact, it often escalates it. As a result, young people have effectively no way to escape their harassers. It follows them 24/7, even in their own homes. Our second concern is sexual exploitation and grooming. One 15-year-old gained more than 500,000 followers on a Chinese version of TikTok and then was targeted by adults posing as executives from an adult content site. They coached her to send sexualized videos and profit shared with her. She earned thousands per month without her family knowing. Police in Canada and in China intervened to prevent further harm. In another case, a grade 11 student was groomed by a 35-year-old man she met on the online game Roblox. He flew from the United States to Saskatchewan to meet her while her parents were at work. When the school intervened, they learned she fully believed that this was a loving relationship, demonstrating how easily it is that teens form bonds with people they've never met in person. Our third concern is around sexting and sextortation and coercion. Teens share intimate images believing they will stay private, and they often don't. Images used for manipulation or revenge after breakups. Where youth once threatened with self-harm to prevent relationships from ending, many now threaten to release private photos. Girls especially experience deep shame. Students also hide explicit content in encrypted or disguised apps, making detection difficult, and families receive inconsistent guidance about when police will intervene. Our fourth area of concern is exposure to harmful online communities. Students access content promoting self-harm, suicide, disordered eating, and other high-risk behaviors. Algorithms push this content to vulnerable teens who become drawn in quietly and privately. We saw a rise in this during COVID, and it remains a serious concern. We also see dangerous social media trends. Recently, RAP facilitators in multiple schools reported a TikTok trend where youth cut their faces under their eyes and along their cheeks and cover the wounds with Band-Aids. Unlike traditional self-harm, this behavior is meant to be visible and public. Students are also forming emotional relationships with AI chatbots, romantic, friendship, and even counseling relationships, leading to isolation, harmful advice, and exposure to unfiltered content. Just this fall, a small committee and I created an infographic to highlight the many risks of these chatbots for students. Influencer messaging is also affecting our youth. Figures like Andrew Tate have normalized misogynistic attitudes among some male students, influencing their behavior toward peers and female teachers. Across all these situations, students are chronically online. They stay up late on social media or gaming, maintain large networks of people they've never met, and nearly every conflict we address now has a digital component: fake accounts, impersonation, group chats, viral posts, or altered images. Our last concern is platform accountability. Harmful accounts using school names or staff and student photos are difficult to remove. Fake pages remain active for long periods, and AI-altered images circulate widely with little recourse. Based on what we're seeing, we offer several recommendations. 1, platform accountability and rapid response. 2, age verification measures. 3, regulation of algorithmic exposure. 4, stronger protection against image-based abuse. And 5, prevention of online grooming. We especially would like to have platforms detect and disrupt adult-minor contact and mandate reporting to law enforcement when grooming behaviors are detected. These issues are widespread and deeply harmful. Without stronger protections and platform accountability, more young people will be exploited, isolated, and traumatized. Thank you for the opportunity to share what we're seeing on the front lines. I welcome your questions.
Very disturbing dispatch from the front lines. Thank you very much for that. Finally, we have André Cote from the DAIS at Toronto Metropolitan University. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, committee, and also an honor to be here speaking with these other witnesses and alarming and such amazing perspective on these issues. So my name is André Cote. I'm the Executive Director of the DAIS. So we are a think tank at Toronto Metropolitan University, and we're focused on public policy and leadership development at the intersection of technology, education, and democracy. We have been doing work on social media in Canada since back around 2018, with a major focus on kids and tech issues. And so this includes our survey of online harms in Canada, which is the longest running survey of its kind that looks at social media use, the harms Canadians are experiencing, and attitudes about what government should do about it. We have a national screen break project that's focused on mobilizing for effective phone-free school policies across the country. And we have other research in areas like digital literacy, AI and children's privacy, social media labeling and AI deepfakes, and mis and disinformation. And so I'll kind of pull from some of this in my remarks. So first, our survey of online harms reinforces that Canadian youth are the most significant users of social media, which is probably not really news, and are also significantly more likely to be exposed to various categories of harms, many of which we've heard about in more detail through some of the other speakers. A caveat to begin, our survey covers Canadians 16 plus, so we track young Canadians as capturing older adolescents to age 29, but still highly relevant, I think. So young Canadians spend far more time on online platforms than older generations, and they're more likely to use platforms like Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, and X, whereas older Canadians are more so on Facebook and also YouTube. Young Canadians are about 50% more likely to report exposure to the worst types of online harms, or some of them, targeting by online harassment and hate speech, seeing violent content and hate speech, or intimate images shared without their consent. And we heard many more examples from Stacey and from others. They are subject to the manipulative design of these platforms, which we've heard about from other speakers. Our research finds that as AI is sort of flooding our online spaces, AI-generated content, deepfake labeling by platforms aren't effective, meaning that users can't tell the difference between what's real and what's fake. And as a result, as we've heard about, a fifth of Canadian youth aged 12 to 17 report negative mental health effects related to their online activity. Second, I'd point out that beyond the impacts on mental health and physical health, social media is a threat to young Canadians' civic health and to Canada's democracy. Others have talked about, the impacts on the information ecosystem. They are the only generation that is more likely to go to YouTube or Instagram for news than traditional media like television or news websites, despite meta platforms like Instagram blocking news content. We find that greater social media use is linked to greater belief in mis and disinformation. And in short, younger Canadians are getting their media on platforms where the conversation is dominated, pushed by algorithms, influencers. Third, Canadians are demanding that government take action to improve online safety for children and youth, but also for everybody. Our research finds 7 in 10 Canadians support government intervention to require online platforms to behave responsibly in protecting users, even where there are some trade-offs. And near universal support for specific types of measures. We test a whole bunch of them, but including and focused on protecting children online. For instance, about 90% support requiring platforms to quickly remove CSAM content and report it to police. North of 80% support requiring platforms to develop measures for child users like parental controls and a bunch more. So the specific things Canadians really get behind. In our phone-free schools work across Canada, a clear and consistent message is that it's not just the phones, but it's the apps on the phones, the social media apps on the phones that are the challenge, driving distraction, bullying, other bad outcomes in schools. Stacey spoke to this in great detail. And I think a key point is students and parents, teachers, school board leaders, all manner are calling for policymakers to step in. This is something out of their control. They need governments to step in here. Coalitions and campaigns we're a part of, like Safer Online Spaces, are coming together across party lines to demand action on this. And so in sum, our message, my message would be, let's get on with it. The government needs to table a new online safety bill, and Parliament needs to move quickly to pass it. We've spent now the better part of 5 years working through this with two bills that didn't quite make it across the finish line. The core of Bill C-63 from the previous Parliament worked with civil society, youth, experts, and even opposition parties supporting core parts around duty of care and transparency in parts 1 and 4 of the bill. Holding big tech platforms to account requires an independent regulator, in our view, a digital safety commission or something of that manner. The bill should include beefed up youth protections, certainly, age-appropriate design standards, opt-out rights from algorithmic feeds. I'm sure we'd have a longer list. And finally, it should include new provisions for AI, including bringing AI chatbots in scope as a regulated service and addressing deepfakes on social platforms. And the very last thing I'd say on phone-free schools, one of the most inspiring parts of our work over the last year or so has been the actual engagement with youth and the extent to which they want to lead on these issues. So I really liked hearing from Dimitri, from Ev, from most of the other witnesses, this idea of youth really need a voice in this. And I think to Perry's point, a lot of us don't fully understand, the worlds that they're living in, and we really need to be respectful of their experiences and include them in this process. So thank you very much.
Sir, we'll now move to questions from members, starting with Mrs. Thomas for 6 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us today. My first questions are going to go to Tiana. I guess I'm just curious, toward the end of your opening remarks, you commented on recommendations that you would leave with the committee. I know that you got cut short. I actually would invite you to repeat the ones that you listed during your opening remarks and perhaps go a little bit deeper in terms of your explanation of those recommendations and why they would be so important to us. And then, of course, to add any additional recommendations that maybe you didn't have the chance to get to at that point in time.
Absolutely. I appreciate that question, especially because I felt definitely the need that there were a few that were left unmentioned. The first being that there have to be monetary consequences for the platforms that fail to comply with Canada's safety regulations and work with the government. And I say that because these are, we call them platforms, they're businesses, they're corporations that make hundreds of millions, billions of dollars off of their consumers. And any other space, we make sure that we have regulations in place for corporations to keep them accountable to their consumers. And unfortunately, what we've seen is it's the monetary piece that keeps these platforms accountable. So that's one that I would, and in BC, we have legislation with regards to non-consensual intimate image sharing, where we do hold companies accountable monetarily. The second one being that there should be straightforward reporting channels with time restrictions on response times. So being able to report anything related to sexual exploitation, child sexual exploitation, or sexual content needs to be not dealt with with an automatic or automated AI bot that decides whether or not it meets the threshold. It should be met with an actual agent and individuals. There needs to be a very quick response time, especially with regards to child sexual exploitation reports. And again, consequences in place if the platforms are not meeting those needs. Mandated minimum age requirements and enforced age verifications. Yes, social media is a powerful tool. I don't believe it's appropriate at all under a certain age. I don't believe that children under the age of 16 should have access to social media platforms because they're not made for children. The ones that they are connecting with are not made for children. And I know that that's a contentious point for many people. I strongly encourage algorithm protection so that minors are not exposed to harmful or inappropriate influencers and are not, predetermined and predestined of what they're going to have, what kind of content is going to be put forth towards them the second they sign up, just because their identity is male or female or whatever their age is. I would like to see a ban on targeted advertising to minors, because again, it's just a different ballgame. It's not the same as watching TV or a movie and having an ad come in place. I'd like to see oversight for child influencer accounts to prevent exploitation. And of course, and many of these platforms are trying to put this in place, but definitely having a default prevention of adult contact with minors. That's where that age verification piece, I believe, is incredibly important. And this includes restricting direct messages and just a heightened review of sexualized content or accounts with large minor followings.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. I just want you to go a little bit more into detail. When you said algorithmic protection, what exactly does that mean?
So as it stands right now, depending on how you sign up on a platform, because a lot of them, they ask your gender or they assume your gender with your age. And what I've seen is if you are a boy and you sign, or if you're a man and you sign up with a social media account, it doesn't matter what your interests are. You are fed a very specific type of content. It's predetermined, it is predestined for what you're going to consume. And that content is oftentimes shocking, violent, provocative. And then it kind of, leads especially young boys who don't have that ability to maintain so much control over their consuming of content, just access to vulnerability. So when I say algorithmic protections, I'm talking about these platforms not being able to predetermine an algorithm based off of somebody's identity when they're signing up if they are a minor.
Thank you. No, I thank you very much. I understand that and definitely see your point there. I guess I want to dive a little bit deeper into one more point that you made, and that was just with regards to increasing the minimum age that a person needs to be in order to have a social media account. So recently we've seen Australia implement legislation that requires a person to be 16 years of age or older in order to hold an account. I'd be curious about your thoughts on that. You also talk about meaningful age verification, so I would suppose that would be the way you would suggest we make sure that that's enforceable. But maybe you can just dive a little bit deeper into that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're seeing Denmark do that. We're seeing Australia do that. I just don't want to see Canada be left behind. I think it's necessary because these social media platforms, just the way that they work, the dynamics, again, these are companies that intentionally use their systems and even the language in which they define the tools that the platform provides. I mean, it's just harmful, and it's going to result in harm. So I think that as a government, and again, this holds the accountability to the platforms where we have a minimum age, and that, again, not all platforms are created the same. So that verification can be flexible depending on what kind of platform we're talking about. I think that it would be effective. And age verification, I mean, people are concerned about security. Well, they already have all the information that they need. A kid showing their passport photo so that they can be protected from exploitation and violence and self-harm, I think is well worth it when that information is already out there for these companies.
Al-Sood, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being with us today. Madame Tessier-Bouchard, je vous ai presque posé une question la semaine dernière avant d'avoir...
Mrs. Tessier-Bouchard, I almost asked you a question last week when I realized that you weren't there. I'm very pleased to be able to ask you that question today. As you know, so the orders want children to understand things before they move into a catastrophic situation. I've looked a number of articles on your site. I see that raccoons are increasingly cute, and you have some stories for the 3-year-olds. You also have various articles. So how do you determine what is appropriate for such a young readership, and how do you develop your content? Well, our starting principle is that a child that understands makes a child that is already far less anxious. What makes us anxious is all of the possible scenarios we can come up with based on a title or some bit of information that we have heard on the radio or conversations among adults that we've overheard. When from the outside we have that information in hand, we are less anxious, and this has been demonstrated. It has also been frequently tested. So how do we go about determining what we will be presenting? If somebody is in the news, and that this news might be heard repeatedly, as I said, on the radio, or if it might also be seen on social media, because as we know, children are on social media, clearly we'll speak about it, regardless of how serious it is. And we are supported. We have psychologists. We also have experts in grief. We also have child philosophers. We are careful about what we choose to say, how we say it, the images we show, and ones how we decide not to show. So we select this, but it isn't about the topic as such. It's about our approach. How do we address this topic? how can we move this through the small circle and to make sure that we're only speaking about the key points and to ensure that children will understand everything without presenting all of the details that might be disturbing for them. There is no topic that we won't address. For example, we might have some very negative news, but we'll decide that we have already presented enough this week and we'll perhaps show a raccoon, as you mentioned. So we're going to show a nice little raccoon or another animal or a nice little story. However, we try to balance at all times and we listen to the children. When the children comment, and sometimes children are very sensitive and they say, oh, that makes me so sad. And since we do have facilitators on the site, 7 days out of 7, sometimes we will either communicate with the child if we feel that there is something that might be harmful for the child. Last week, a child said that we were speaking about bullying, and he wrote us in a comment, he says, my bullies live right next door to me, and he's a professor, and the adults don't help me. So what we do is we sent this email to the school service. We forwarded the email. We said there is a child that looks like he needs help. And we also wrote to the child and said that he was not alone, that there were resources available to him. We gave those resources to him. There is a support available. But the children, nevertheless, learn on the site how to behave as good digital citizens and how to make respectful comments. If a child starts saying things that are not respectful, we're not going to banish him, but we'll contact the child. We'll tell him or her, well, I don't know if you're so proud about the comments you made. It seems that it's really not in line with our rules. And 99% of the time, the child will say, well, I didn't even know that this was a bad comment. And that's media education. It's digital education. It means, yes, this is a harmful comment. And there are people behind the screens who read this. If you aren't nice, people might find that hurts them. So do you want to reformulate that we're going to erase it and we're going to drop a new comment? It represents a lot of work. It's an investment to have 2 people who read all of the comments. We have 110,000 views per week, but we do this because it is absolutely essential to educate children to this digital life, even though we don't give access to this before they're 16 years old. For example, a child that won't have any access to candy before age 16, it's not that they haven't seen information on that before, on the harm that sugar causes and how bad it is for your health to eat a lot of sugar, but he won't have any more tools at 16 than he had at 8. So we really focus on education. We focus on support. And I think that it is possible. Well, on social media, my colleagues spoke to this today. There might be entry-level barriers we could put in place for age, but they're clever. They put a fictitious age, or they put their siblings' names there. Certainly, but we do have to support them better. But at the same time, it is absolutely essential to educate them. And I think that we've left behind an entire generation. And I think we need to make up the grounds lost when it comes to digital education, the literacy. Thank you very much for that answer. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, your time is up.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci beaucoup.
Mr. Shampoo, 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for the witnesses for being with us. I'll continue with you, Mrs. Tessier-Bouchard, because I'd like to hear your answer. There's a point I found very interesting. You spoke about this generation that we must have left behind, this digital generation. We haven't focused on enough. And you've made that decision to devote more time to the younger children to build the future generation. So have we abandoned the one that is over 12 years old at this time? So in your idea, in the As de l'Info, could you not have included adolescents? Or would these have been 2 completely different projects? So in other words, have we left behind that generation? And you're saying that we're going to make this up with future generations. Well, the ones we missed are around 20 to 25 years of age. Those in high school right now, especially in Quebec, do take courses where we focus a lot on citizenship education, information education. We also try to feed critical thinking in the schools. But our project at the ASELEF and other projects is where my expertise lies, and we have to be careful. Yes, you need to focus your projects, because if we try to speak to everybody, you speak to nobody. A project that is well identified and targeted will reach its target, and other persons who would be interested in the target as well. You can't turn this project ASELEF into an extensive project that reaches high school as well. Currently, we have this project, and we have everything we need except the funding. But we would like to head to something that makes it possible to create a bridge between the ASELEF and the older generation media. You've raised a few points in your opening remarks that really resonated with me. Among others, you said that we have to stop speaking about these young people as being tomorrow's citizens because they're today's citizens. Because, as they say, they can also become leaders, and they can be leaders. And you took part in a study where children leaders can contribute to a better society. And I'd like to come back to that, if I may, because you're presenting the ASELEF as being a kind of experiment whose successes can be picked up and applied to similar initiatives. Earlier, Mr. Osworth spoke about the different articles of the ASELEF, and I was extremely interested in what you did in a hospital, children's hospital, where the Grinch tried to steal toys, but the police intervened because this is fascinating for children. I know that I'm erring a bit in another direction. I'd like to come back to the studies, but I'd like to talk about the spin-offs today. Are you able to evaluate the effects that you have had on children at the ASELEF since you created that site in 2022? It's difficult to measure. But yes, we do have a number of indicators. This study was conducted at the beginning of when our organization was created, the ASELEF. If we did it now, no doubt we would compile many more answers and we would get more answers. But the answer that we have to be interested in is that children, when they feel competent, want to share that competency. And when they share those skill sets with them, with their families, with other children, even with their classmates, really become leaders working against disinformation. And in our case, that is what we're interested in. And when you test their knowledge and you ask them, for instance, well, have you ever heard about disinformation? And could you identify it? And I have some numbers here. Because those children who are on the ASELEF at 84% said yes. They know what disinformation is. They feel that they have the right tools in order to identify it. And the children who were not on the ASELEF in that same survey said at 44% that they could identify. So this sense of competency, the fact that it's possible to say things in a different way, that we are doing this, we're enabling them to realize that they are competent. It gives them hope, and we say that gives them a certain amount of power. We tell them, that's one of our slogans, that curiosity is a form of power, and it empowers them to ensure that adults, they can say to an adult, look, that's AI, and why? I can explain to you why. They're very happy to share that. I really like the expression used, a pollinator, and we've addressed that in previous meetings with other guests that appeared before the committee. And when we began this study, and I often repeat this, I was convinced that banning social media for young people that are under 16 years old is a very interesting approach. I still believe that because, as you've emphasized, I think we've left behind one generation. So maybe we could make up for that damage. But the more we speak about this with people like yourself, who have brought about constructive ideas and that are usually based on digital literacy in education, the more I think that this might be a possible solution. It is certainly a tool. Could this be a temporary measure? Because the generation you're currently building, thanks to your initiatives, is going to ensure that in now 10 to 15 years from now means that we might not have to limit access because we have been able to pollinate enough so that this is no longer a societal issue. That is, disinformation will no longer be this issue. What do you think about that? Well, I believe that we need to ensure that our young and older citizens have the ability to think critically, more so than today, that they are able to understand and to read between the lines. And that will be based on education. It will be based on content that they have access to.
Là, il y a une embûche en ce moment.
And currently there is a hindrance there because content, when it comes through the media, is blocked. We obviously don't speak to children on social media because they are not supposed to be there. So we speak to the parents and to the teachers. And of course, we're able to somewhat bypass the five web giants who publish this content because we are registered as an educational institution, organization. But these echo chambers feed into each other, and we have very few tools, even for adults or youth, adolescents, that we can share with them so that they can see something else, they can read something else, that they understand that there is a media in Quebec and Montreal, and we want them to know what they're called. They're young people who've never opened up a newspaper in their lives. They've never read a news article in their life. So in the old days, there would be a newspaper on a kitchen table. You always saw it. But now it is no longer visible. And I think that's harmful. So obviously, a single education can't do everything, but it can nevertheless do a great deal if we can continue functioning. Thank you. Mr. Généraux, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. Mrs. Bouchard, Tessie Bouchard, I'd like to continue with you. Could you explain to me, and I understood that parents had to authorize the child to be one of your readers or one of the members of your group, the Âge de les As de l'Info. Have I understood that correctly? Yes. So inevitably, the parent has to give permission. So that is how you're able to control the youth that are with you from the 8 to 12-year-olds. Yes, we also have older ones, and we allow them to obtain the information, but it's either through obtaining permission by the parents or the teacher, because we have one section for children and one for the educators. So the teacher can send a letter to the parents where the parent authorizes his or her child to create a profile because there are teaching activities and a teacher wants to use them in class. So there are two different ways to verify that the child hasn't registered alone. There's always verification. Last October, an article was published in the As de l'Info about the war in Gaza. It's a journalist been covering this. And Caroline Faure wrote a very interesting article on the issue. And a young youth responded. And I have two young ones, and I've got grandchildren, 11 and 12 years old. They're experts in information. They're one of ours. Yes, and my grandchild, my grandson loves hunting and fishing. I can ask him all kinds of questions about what kind of weapon to use in hunting. He's very familiar with this. Of course, there are young people who are on your network who are also very interested in international politics, because I was looking at one of the answers by a young person, and there is a text in the answer, and that's very well laid out, and it's full of very solid information. So what measures do you put in place that these youth are the ones answering? Do you have a means of checking that it is them? I don't want to take the time to read through the entire response given by the young person. I won't give his name either. What's his pseudonym? Jeune Kestan is his name. Like Quebecistan, Jeune Kestan, Youth Kestan. he's extremely interested in international politics. When I was reading his answer, if look, I would never have been able to write that when I was 12 years old. So maybe some are smarter than others, but they are well informed. That's certain. Well, there are some that adore politics. We had election nights at each election. There were thousands of them who were falling to said, "Oh no, I don't want to go to bed, Mom. I want to find out what's going on." It's very surprising. Well, I don't want to cut you off, but it seems that in the elections where you were, the Conservatives won. So that's good news. No, that wasn't us. No, that wasn't us. But there's a child who was asking why the popular party was actually not the popular party, why it wasn't elected. But sometimes children do provide answers that are AI assisted. We see that sometimes. And sometimes we'll write back and ask, look, it doesn't matter, but did you get some help from AI to draft that answer? Sometimes we do it. Sometimes we also check the email address to see whether or not it is a children's address. And then we're going to write to check. Well, and we'll verify with the parent or with the child, or the parent rather, to see whether they know that it's a youth site. But usually, yes, an adult could also register and say that he or she is 12 years old and make comments, but it's very rare. But the measures that you put in place in order to avoid that there is a bias on either side and that you remain neutral in the questions you ask is important. If you're asking a question because, well, we also usually know the answer, but is addressed to youth from 8 to 12 years old. So do you ensure that there's a certain amount of neutrality, politically, socially, etc.? Well, generally speaking, yes, absolutely. We always have for and against that provides arguments in favor or against an issue. And this week we were speaking about cosmetics for 3 plus 5 children of 3 years old and over. And we also always ask children whether or not they've read certain things. So we want to obtain comments and feedback. But sometimes when there are serious issues at stake or issues that really affects the children, sometimes we can direct the question to say, for instance, look, you might want to share your condolences with the family that has just experienced this tragedy, or what would you like to say? But often it's simply to start a discussion with the children in the comments. So obviously you don't do any advertising in order to promote the ASE. I'm afraid your time is up.
5 minutes.
Ms. Sharifi, much of your work highlights the risks of appearance-focused influencer culture. At the same time, young people clearly see certain... Fantastic. Let's try that again. Ms. Sharifi, much of your work highlights the risks of appearance-focused influencer culture. At the same time, young people clearly see certain influencers, especially in fitness or lifestyle spaces, as positive ones. You even mentioned earlier that you're a social media influencer in many ways yourself. In your experience, how do young people balance these contrasting realities, the positive influences online and the more harmful content they encounter?
That's a great question. I will say that the notion that we can ask youth to balance content that is pushed to them almost involuntarily is a difficult, is not a straightforward answer. And I would say that yes, they do follow health gurus and certain health style influencers, absolutely, but there's no censorship for what type of content and exactly what kind of messaging is being put out to these young people. And we expect them to consume and interpret and critically think about content the same way that an adult would. And I think that in itself is problematic. I do want to emphasize that we provide prevention education on digital literacy and online exploitation. I've educated over 100,000 people in Canada, most of them being students. So that education piece is important. Yes, they can critically think. However, these influencers, especially the health ones, there's always that subliminal messaging that is harmful. And that's where we see these studies showing and demonstrating that kids that consume media have, gender issues with, not gender, issues with like body dysmorphia and eating disorders and things like that.
You've previously noted that, and I quote, children and teens are constantly bombarded with images of influencers living their best lives, and that this changes how they see themselves. From your experience, how does this reality impact the way in which young people talk about their confidence or self-image?
It's being compared to a reality that does not exist. Especially with the influencers that we see right now, and especially with the ones that these kids follow. We're looking at a curated life, a life where money comes easily, where beauty standards are unrealistic without Botox and filler and filters. They're comparing themselves to something that is absolutely not real and is fabricated. And it's very difficult for them to tell the difference. I mean, back in the day when we read teen magazines, that in itself was harmful to our self-esteem. But you're looking at constant, hours of scrolling of these standards that are just not based in reality. And it does have an effect. It does have an influence.
Noted in your opening remarks that influencer culture turns people into a product. Could you expand on how this may impact the way young people present themselves online and then further on when they turn 18?
Yes. So influencer culture is normalizing the commodification of people. So as an influencer, you yourself are the product. That's where we see these brand deals and these, this ability to make thousands of dollars, creating content. And so when we start to see that we're normalizing that you as a person, as with your body, you are a product for people to consume. The line starts to get blurred, right? So, okay, people pay you for your content that you're putting out there, and that content could be very fine and neutral. However, at some point, there becomes the blurred line of, well, I'm the commodity. At what point does that branch into my body? Does that branch into sexual and provocative activity and actions? And so that's where we're kind of seeing like that normalization. We've changed the language of prostitution-like behaviors online, right? So it's no longer seeking arrangements, sugar dating, sugar baby relationships. We're not using those terms. Like the kids aren't using those terms anymore, right? They're not saying I have a sugar daddy. They just have these followers, these fans that are paying them money for the way that they look and for the sexual conversations that they're engaging in. And it feels more normal because of the influencer culture that, again, has normalized the commodification of people. The same way as we see things like OnlyFans. Well, you're not engaging in porn. You're an adult content creator, right? So that language, this culture of influencing where anybody is a content creator, regardless of what kind of content they're putting out there, it blurs the lines for these young people. And that's where we're seeing, I go into schools, you have no idea the number of young girls who are, number one, already engaging in these behaviors, and number two, waiting until they turn 18 to engage in them because they're falsely glamorized.
Thank you. Monsieur Champoux, 2 minutes et 10.
Merci beaucoup. Je reviens à vous.
Mr. Champoux, 2.5 minutes. Mrs. Tessier-Bouchard, I'd like to come back to you because I still have many questions for you. But earlier, I heard mention of this young person who made a comment in one of the sections of your site, and it was an aggressive comment. And when you responded to him, he came back and said, I didn't know that my comment was wrong. We don't only see that kind of comment with young people, something that really explains the aggressive behavior we often see in social media. And often we receive comments from citizens who are angry and who express this anger quite forcibly. And as soon as we respond to them, we give them an answer, we're also going to see a change in tone because they often say to us, I never thought that you would actually read my comment. So it isn't something that is unique only to young persons. but I've noticed that even youth have the sense that they are not being heard, that they don't have any voice. So I imagine that you're aware of this. That must be part of the work that you do with youth and the sense that they don't feel that they're being heard. Yes, absolutely. Often we give them the floor and we follow up on this. Last week, Mrs. Ruba Gazal spoke about the violence that she was subjected to online, its hate, messaging, etc. And we spoke to our members on the platform, said that it's important to remain respectful. And Mrs. Bagasa she really deplored this, and other politicians deplored this hatred they're seeing online. And we asked young people, well, what would you like to say to Mrs. Gaza? And there were more than 100, and I don't quite know exactly how many there were. There were several hundreds of them who responded and sent this to Mrs. Gazal. And we tell the children, and she answered. It was kind of her. She made a video that we'll be posting on the platform. The idea is always to say, yes, you have a certain amount of power, and you must use it correctly. And that's what we're trying to work on with them. Let's say if we're going to, I think, I haven't quite seen what we've posted online this week yet, but there are children in Ontario in a school who realized that the site of the municipality was only in English, and it is an Ontario French-speaking school, and the students asked that the site be translated, and it was done. And the mayor said, well, you're absolutely correct. And so we're trying to show to the children they can do something, that when they take action, when they work together, when they're respectful and they comply with the rules, they're able to change the world, and that their voices matter. And afterwards, of course, you have to learn how to express yourself and how to properly direct our efforts. But when you feel that you're being heard, already you are less angry. Thank you very much.
5 minutes.
Good. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to direct my questions, as usual, to Ms. Hansen. 28,000 students in the Board of Education. You mentioned the RAP program. I'm going to mention it a little bit because it started in 2003. Now you're in 14 high schools in not only the public division, but the Catholic division. It's the Restorative Action Program, where you have somebody from outside the school division actually in schools, and maybe talk about the trust then that is needed for students along with this RAP person that all of a sudden is in these schools every day now.
Well, the RAP workers are trained in mediation, and they're often social workers or teachers. In the Catholic division, they're teachers. In the public division, they're social workers. And so students will often share, they approach them as if counselors, or they reach out to them for help, especially with bullying and a lot of these online platform issues that we're seeing. Like we're seeing like so many different facets of technology harms, like even just these large group chats between like we'll have, for instance, the Chinese kids will all have a massive group chat together. And so then issues will come out of that. And so then our RAP workers will step in and help to sort out those problems. And so there is a lot of trust between students and RAP, yes.
What percentage of your time or your resource time are spent dealing with the social media related issues with students in your school?
Well, as counselors, we often hear it first, and then we refer to administrators or to RAP, depending on the severity of what we're hearing. Certainly, we then pick up the side of helping kids to deal with the fallout of the things that have happened, so supporting them to manage the anxiety and the large emotional issues that can often come with some of the things that we're seeing.
School to deal with some of these issues, and are the Are they very successful? Some are.
Most are not. To be honest, like I'm the mother of 4 daughters and my oldest child is 33. So she went through high school when MSN first came in. And honestly, since then, our school resource officers will tell us all the time that all of the issues come from, or not all of them, but the majority of our issues are coming from online behavior, and it happens outside of school, and then it gets brought into the schools, and so that's why schools are so intertwined in all of these things. Certainly, it's a daily occurrence dealing with kids and the fallout of stuff that's happening online.
What would you like to see from us as like?
Well, certainly we'd like to see platforms when we approach them to take down images. Like right now, the only way we're able to get images and harmful things taken down quickly is by investigating and finding the person, the perpetrator of it, and then getting that person to take it down. When we've reached out to platforms because of privacy laws and those kinds of things, they really circumvent responsibility for being able to remove images or false fake accounts. And so that would be one for sure. Age, 100% age verifications. Just based on children's brain development. Like kids that are under the age of 16, they just don't have the capacity to be able to manage what Tiana was saying about these platforms are not designed for children. They were designed for adults. And now we're asking 8 and 9-year-olds to navigate that. And it's really scary. The other piece of it is we can teach them how to be better online and to recognize when there's harms coming. In saying that, it's so addictive. The kids are so addicted to it that they know a lot of kids, they're being bullied through Snapchat and they can't stop looking. So the reality is we can't put it in the kids' hands. We have to help to support. I think we need to mesh the two, teach them how to be good citizens and how to be better at being online, but we also need to protect them by putting in some significant measures. And I think age is a huge one.
No, sorry, you're ahead of time. You're well over. Interesting, though, that privacy rules supersede safety rules. That's what I took away from that. Monsieur Toumba, c'est à vous pour 5 minutes.
You have 5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to address my question to Ms. Eve Tessier-Bouchard. So in your opening remarks, you indicated that 66% of the youth in your organization felt that they were ready to lead, and I've counted quite a lot of people, but so in today's world, and when we speak about social media, well, I drew a comparison. In my mind, it's as if real life is replicated in social media. Let me explain. Today's influencers who are paying to follow people who do things online that are not okay really are creating another world. It's as though it's transposed. The words are different. But in your approach for a young person, and something that impressed me, I have 4 children myself. I really like your platform. How do you encourage children to be interested in reliable news sources in this media world? Well, for children, it's a little easier because, first of all, the parents who are interested usually in what they're consuming online. Usually it's about the parents, but it's also very much about the schools as well. We organize workshops on education training. It is with the Quebec Centre for Media Learning and Education, where journalists visit the classes and they do surveys and games with the children in order to debunk disinformation. So, of course, it's easier to reach out to children than it is to teens. That is clear. Teenagers are already on social media. They already have their habits. They already have an algorithm that has been created. So clearly, this is more difficult, but I believe that by calling on persons who have the charisma, who speak to them, and who are able to speak to them frankly and in a non-kind of pedagogical tone, I think we can reach out to them. Hugo Decrypte, who's very popular in France, has over 1 million followers, who came to Quebec recently and already has some 135 followers on Hugo Decrypte Quebec. And this demonstrates that there is an interest in it. It also shows that it is possible to do something for that age group. Hugo Decrypte essentially has the young adult teenage target. And it also shows that we are unfortunately not in that space. There are people from France coming here and who are taking up this market instead of us because we don't have the means to do it as they are able to do it. They even have a whole team that is responsible for sales and that is able to earn ad revenue, and they bring this back to France. And all the better if there are Hugo Decryptes there, but we are still not in a position to do this. We have not yet occupied that space, unfortunately. So earlier, my colleague, Mrs. Thomas, spoke about what Australia has put in place recently for social media to ban access to the under 16-year-olds to social media. But I'm wondering that if we adopt this kind of approach, do you believe that from now on, we really would have a means of identifying the person and their age? Because you work with minors, of course, but could this approach make it also possible to later to better support these platforms or to help those who are on the platforms? Well, possibly, but you have 4 children. Yes. When you ban certain things to your children and then suddenly it is within their reach, they'll be almost drawn to exaggerating, to going overboard. Let's say you're not allowed to eat junk food, but if there's junk food at a buffet at a certain point, the children will jump on it. They're going to throw themselves at it. So certainly you can forbid and ban, and it is important to regulate this. That is absolutely key. It's also important to try and ensure that the algorithms are such that we can take measures to ensure that sites are not accessible by a certain target group, and it's possible. And apparently that is quite easy from what I'm told. But should we ban it? If that is your question, I think that it is going to be very costly to ban access. I think it's also going to require many resources, and perhaps some of those resources should be invested at the base and should enable us to support children and youth and adolescents in their digital identity. Thank you.
5 minutes. You have the floor, sir.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Ms. Sharifi, first of all, thanks for the work that you do for the Center for Exploitation Education. You told this committee that you believe kids under the age of 16 should not be on social media. So can you tell why you believe that and what you recommend as wider solutions to protect kids who are on social media?
Absolutely. One thing that I will say is that, when we're talking about social media or access to the internet, it's not something that happens at a certain designated time. Kids are online right now 24/7. It's just the online world, the in-person world, it is intertwined. So the idea that we can monitor our kids online or that we can have, just teach them, and then that's going to be enough. And again, as somebody who educates kids, like we see the effect of education. It is effective. I'm not denying that. However, by not creating restrictions, especially age restrictions, we're putting the onus on parents. And as a parent, as an educator, yes, education is effective. As a parent, it's not enough. It's not enough. If you are parenting a child, we're not around 24/7. I give my child is 5. I gave her my phone for 2 seconds. She ordered 12 banana loaves from Starbucks. So that control and that monitoring, it's just not there. One other thing, and Stacey pointed to this as well, and we know that kids, they have not developed their prefrontal cortex. Yes, they can critically think. Yes, they should have agency. And yes, they are brilliant. However, they are still youth. We cannot expect them to be able to deal with what comes with social media use. We can teach them the signs of grooming. And again, it's effective. However, at the same time, if these children, which they all do, have the need for belonging, attention, love, acceptance, community, they're still vulnerable regardless of however much information and knowledge that they have. And so, and these platforms, again, just the nature of the way that these platforms work, are we going to ask all the platforms, and are they going to oblige to put safety over freedom of speech? Are they going to be monitoring every single type of content that is being put out there? Are they going to be able to have control over every individual and the direct messages being sent to minors? Because in my experience, the levels of grooming, predators reaching out to kids, kids being exposed to harmful content, and just their unlimited access to so much information that they should not have access to, we're not going to be able to monitor them and teach them enough that in itself would keep them safe. So again, those age verifications, I think that there should be a minimum age. I think that when we talk about having these, there were actually a couple apps that did come out with age verification where they used AI. It was extremely effective. We tried to get around it in multiple different ways. We couldn't. They were extremely effective. If you tried to get around it, you were blocked from creating another account on the platform. So there are ways that we can get around this. Yes, it will be costly, but the life of children is priceless. And I think that it's even more costly when we're seeing the cost of exploitation and grooming and the aftermath of having to deal with those things. So, I mean, moderation is important. Education and equipping kids is critical. But we also have to hold these corporations who've created businesses that are not safe for kids or made for kids to give, free access for these children and youth to be on these platforms and leave it to the parents to be able to monitor that.
What do you think of Instagram for teens? Is that a good thing, bad thing?
I'm going to speak very bluntly here. I don't believe Mark Zuckerberg cares about our kids, period. Meta does not care about our kids. I think Instagram for teens is a problem, and it's just another way for them to make money. And the safeguards that they are claiming to have in place and what they're going to do is just not going to be enough. There are social media platforms that are being created specifically for young people. Those are wonderful. We should do that. But again, putting that trust and that ownership on companies like Meta, who've shown time and time again they don't care. I think Instagram for teens is harmful, period.
Mr. Miles, you have the floor now for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all the witnesses. This is always fascinating, a really good conversation today. I think one thing I fear is that we're getting a little bit mixed up in between online activity and social media, because they're not really the same. And we are hesitant sometimes. Your kid going on the internet to Google something is very different than going on Instagram or Facebook. And the algorithm is part of that difference. I totally agree on digital literacy. Sometimes I wonder the extent to which digital literacy can handle the algorithm. I feel like it can help us to a great extent. Of course, it helps us understand how the algorithm works, which is always valuable. But I think the question we're asking ourselves is the algorithm such that it makes regulation very difficult, or the nuance of digital literacy enough to handle it for a young person? Whereas it's not just about disinformation and information. It's not just about the quality of the content they're getting. It's about being reinforced on feelings of acceptance or, anger and all of these things. So I guess maybe, Andre, you could speak to the challenge of regulating, social media or the algorithm itself, and as opposed to online spaces. I think sometimes we there's a confluence of the two that maybe is not always helpful.
Sure. So it's a great question, and I really agree with the way you framed that. I think, there are broader questions around like all of our addiction, like to our devices, the way we engage on these devices, and then there are specific sets of questions related to social media platforms and other types of platforms or apps on those devices. I think that really our view is Canada has been working at this for 5 years now. How do we get to a place where we regulate social media? Our view is we were very close at the end of the last parliament. We were very close to a bill that could get through, and it was a bit of a compromise package. And basically what it would have done is put duty of care on or duty of responsibility on platforms with a focus on the 7 categories of harmful content. So put requirements on them to deal with those, with specific onus on the 2 most egregious, a specific focus on kids, with a regulator who could actually effectively oversee these things. I think we just need to move forward with those things. I think what we've learned is we need heightened provisions to focus on kids, and I think we've talked about a lot of those. We've learned a lot even in the last year or two on, Tiana speaks so thoughtfully about influence, for example, and how that space has been evolving. I think obviously the impacts of AI is something that we'll need to consider, but I just think we need to get on with it, and I don't think we need to go back to square one. I think we know the broad strokes of what we have to do, and what I hope is that the government, which has signaled that it should be coming with a bill soon, and that Parliament, who's had a couple cracks previously at going through this legislation, just recognizes the urgency of moving this through quickly. And just in closing, I would just say, I think all of us have to deal with these broader issues of how we're adapting to our screen time. I am a terrible influence on my kids. My wife and I will have our screens in front of our faces. So there's a broader set of kind of social issues, social norms that we all need to think about, and then there's a specific set that we need to deal with on social media. This is the way I think about it.
I'm speaking the same language here, Andre. It comes from experience. I'm not addicted to a website. I'm addicted to social media services that are feeding me, snowboard videos and guitar videos on my, it's on my Instagram. It's not, you know what I mean? It's just, they're very different things. And I too struggle with it. I've watched it change throughout my career in the last 20 years. I was a musician. My life, the way I promoted my shows was by way of social media. But even the control over the relationship between what I produced and the audience completely changed, because it became the algorithm. And this is part of the conversation that we should probably talk about too, because we're talking about even the narrative of the influencer being a relationship with the fan. It's actually not. The algorithm now feeds suggested content. So the relationship is between the algorithm and the user, not between the creator and the user. Whereas that was our way to build fans. That was our way to build a following. Now it's very much parsed up with the algorithm in between. So I think I hear you very much, Andre. And I wondered if, Dimitri, if you had any comments. So right when you grab your drink of water, I asked you the question. Sorry, I will.
So enjoy your water, Dimitri. And we'll move on to Mr. Shampoo, 2 minutes et demie.
Merci, Madame.
Mr. Shampoo for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Tessie Bouchard, I'm coming back to you because my colleague, Mr. Miles, raised an interesting question. There's a difference between going on the internet and being on social media. It's a very different type of interaction. Do you think, so based on your own experience, would it be relevant that an initiative be put in place for youth in the same age group, the 8 to 12-year-olds, that would be a true social media, a little bit a type of media where young people can exchange on the basis of publications they've issued themselves? Would this be feasible, obviously, with oversight, with framing? Because do you nevertheless believe that it could work? Could it work? Yes, of course. Is it useful? Is it achievable? I'm not sure about that. Children in elementary school are still very young. Well, let's say a bit later. Let's say closer to adolescence, maybe not so much in elementary school, but certainly in high school. I think they would need to be supported in using social media because they're already in it. Is this something that could be of interest as an offer for them? And also, would it be useful for us as a society, as adults, as parents? I'm not sure that I can really answer that question. But my view is that I have the sense that what they're interested in doing is belonging to the adult world. And unfortunately, that plays tricks on them as well. Well, I don't think you mean the adult world on social media. I'm not sure that we really want to send them there. But let's speak more to your own site and the Ask Info. So I'm sure that you don't make a lot of money with this. It's an investment because you have to believe in this project. But do you, let's say, if we want to speak about proposals, recommendations for the purpose of the studies before the committee, do you have the sense that it would be a good idea for us to compel companies who do information to have a module for youth and for digital information for youth? Could that be part of our recommendations, do you believe? Well, I don't know if it's necessary, to the extent that what is necessary is that the media, in my view, come together. We already collaborate with Réseau Presse and all of the French language minority media outlets in the country. We already have a page in the newspaper Le Devoir. We publish a page every Saturday in that newspaper, both digital and the paper copy. I think it's especially important to encourage media to come together for the good of children, rather than launching all kinds of different initiatives that will be costly and will eventually lead to the same result. So that is what we're trying to bring everybody together around this project. No, we don't make any money with this, of course. And it's been working on youth content for 35 years now. We've never made any money on that. But it is a first step into the information world, into the digital world. So if everybody comes together to work on a single project, that already will help more children. The idea is to be able to reach out to as many children as possible. What you're doing is very good. It's a very pleasant site, even for adults. I'd like to commend you on that, and I encourage you to continue. I'd also like to encourage to ask for the necessary funding, because I think it deserves to be much more encouraged beyond. We need more initiatives like yours. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Over to you for 5 minutes.
Sure. Tiana, I'm going to come back to you. I'm hoping that you can provide a few comments with regards to the creation and use of deep fakes. I know that this is something that you have some expertise on. On your website, you state that, quote, over 90% of deep fake content online is pornographic in nature, which is alarming. And especially when it's often young people who are used to make these images. I would love for you to expand on what you're observing and the impact that this is having on young people, and how we might be able to avoid this in the future.
Absolutely. It is, I would say this is one of the largest trends that we're seeing. It's these AI deep fake models have completely changed the game from peer exploitation all the way to predation and sextortion. So we have there's millions of child sexual abuse materials that are being generated constantly through these deep fakes. And so what we're seeing is, number one, peers are now using these AI tools to create deep fakes of other peers. Sometimes it's for blackmail. Sometimes it's for entertainment, oddly enough. And then we're also seeing that sextortion, the grooming into sextortion has completely changed. So the number of boys that are reaching out to us because some person they were speaking to was able to take just one picture that they had on their profile and use that to create a deep fake nude, and then sextort them, blackmail them. There's an alarming rate of that happening. When we talk about, prevention, again, number one is certain tools should just not be accessible. That's just number one. Number two is that education piece for young people. And it's something that I think we're missing, where we can't just talk about digital literacy and not incorporate consent and healthy boundaries into that conversation, and really showing the parallel of what that looks like in person and online. I think that we're noticing, again, just because of the nature of what kids are exposed to on social media, that there is almost a normalization of using somebody's content against them and without their knowledge and without their consent. And so, I think that those would be my two recommendations, is if there's a way to flag these platforms because they're not on the dark web. And also if there's a way that we can start to engage in prevention education for our young people.
Thank you for that. I'm actually just going to take you one step back, and that is actually just for the sake of this report and its content. I'm actually going to ask you to describe what a deepfake is and how it's created.
Absolutely. Deepfake is just essentially any kind of imagery that is created by AI that is not real, it's not the actual person, it's based off of a person. And so what we're seeing when we say deep fake, we're talking about an AI generated image, oftentimes off of a real individual. So when I'm using the terminology deep fake nude, I'm referring to an AI tool that is using one person's picture, a real picture of a person, to then generate a nude image or video of them.
And I'm also hoping that you can talk a little bit about also some of the research that you've done with regards to AI and how it can be used to detect human trafficking online. One of the things that I was reading was some research that you did within BC, and you did some research with regards to sex work ads in British Columbia. And you found that 40% of the ads pointed to sex trafficking and child exploitation. Maybe just comment on that.
Absolutely. AI is a powerful tool. Technology is a powerful tool. It can be used for good. And of course, when individuals like myself and professionals in this space come to use it, it can have great effect. So my role in that research project was that we were training these web crawlers to detect situations and instances of human trafficking. And so my role as an expert in this space was to come up with the content that would train them. So in black and white terms, how would we determine if a posting on these common escort sites is actually indicative of somebody being trafficked, or of child exploitation and child trafficking? And yes, we did find 40% of those were definitively instances of trafficking. It would be a much larger percentage if our threshold for definitive was not at least 3 different categories in what we had outlined to be indicators of trafficking. If that makes sense.
I wish we had a little bit more time, but unfortunately, I have to cut it off there. Thank you.
Very disturbing testimony today. Mr. Miles, you have the floor again for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll just continue on, and Dimitri, maybe you could get a shot to answer the questions we were talking about before about some of the regulatory challenges. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. So I appreciate the point you bring up about the difference between kind of the web and social media, and I think that's an important nuance, but it's also one that is continually conflated in how these things are actually used by young people. So that's one thing we've noticed from a media literacy education perspective. Even just communicating what that difference is to young people in itself can be important, especially with younger kids who, in our kind of work and studying with them, don't know the difference really between a social media platform and a search engine, for example, right? It's all places to get your information, and they all kind of intertwine, and one leads to another and leads in and out. So I don't think you can silo them in the same way, but we do appreciate that, especially in terms of regulation, we do want to kind of do that, but it's important to think about how they are also intertwined. In terms of sort of some of these broader issues, especially in terms of the algorithm, I think this is one thing that comes up a lot when I think about regulations and age restrictions. And one of the questions I always have is, okay, if there's going to be an age restriction, what else is going to happen alongside that policy? Because I think, as we all know, I think we can all point to people in our lives, right? If we're talking about the personalization algorithm, turning 16 or 18 doesn't make one magically immune to the effects of that algorithm, right? So alongside any type of age restrictions, is there anything else happening to address some of these larger underlying issues in terms of both the content of social media and the infrastructure of social media? So that's something that I would want to consider if I was thinking about that. And I think kind of algorithmic personalization is central to that. And yeah, I also want to kind of reflect on some things that were said before, and that I do completely agree that not every issue that we're talking about is an education issue, and that certain things are kind of media literacy issues and certain things might be regulatory issues, and parsing those things, I think, is one of the major challenges for the committee.
Exactly the challenge that we're facing right now, and this has been such. We've all said it's. There's a generation of us that didn't have it, and we're catching up on it. But then there's also this regulatory piece that I fear that it might not be enough. I sometimes question. I mean, a lot of it's come down to transparency as well, especially when we're talking about the infrastructure. Maybe you can just chat a little bit about what your experience has been in infrastructure, social media infrastructure, algorithmic infrastructure regarding transparency. What are the possibilities there?
That's for me? So kind of from the educational perspective, I think, and from kind of the media literacy perspective, it does kind of return to that as a key piece as part of kind of the education for youth, understanding why they're seeing what they're seeing, how what they're seeing is not necessarily kind of natural, that there is some kind of infrastructure underneath, and making this thing that is relative, that is invisible, more visible, but that is continually a struggle. It's a struggle because we don't know, and researchers don't know, and don't have access to what's actually going on. We can only ever talk about it in abstract terms, right? We have kind of this mythic figure of the capital T algorithm, capital A, that in terms of how we talk about digital media and digital media literacy, and especially talking about with young people, can sometimes seem as this constant, this entity that can't be addressed, can't be understood, can't be regulated. And I think I think there's something happening there strategically when that happens. But it does make it difficult to educate about, especially because then it also can become a scapegoat where everything then becomes blamed on the algorithm, when there might be some other kind of underlying causes of some of the effects that we're seeing.
For me, the transparency, that's exactly it. The questions we were asking on AI came down to the fact that we're fishing in the dark a little bit here in terms of knowing where we're going, because we don't know what the infrastructure actually looks like under the hood. And so that's what I'm a bit challenged with. Last week we had a witness that spoke about the ads, and I thought that was to get at behind, because actually it's all about monetization of attention. And maybe Ms. Sharifa, maybe you could speak to that, just the commodification of attention and ads, and whether that's an effective way to address some of this.
Could you clarify what you mean by addressing this through ads? Are you talking about educational ads?
Being able to advertise on accounts that are owned and directed towards children.
Yes. I think that's again one of the harms that we are seeing, and that's why one of my requests for regulation is that we should not be able to have ads targeted to minors, especially because, and in my experience, I've seen certain ads that are completely inappropriate that would come across a child's account. I've reported it, and I've not received any kind of response or follow-up. So I think that's, again, holding the platforms accountable for their ability to allow anybody to create an ad and to target it to specific populations that shouldn't be targeted to. And one example that I'll give is Seeking. The company Seeking used to be Seeking Arrangements. They are now doing tons of ads, and those ads have come across burner minor accounts that we have made for research purposes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Mason, I'm sorry you haven't had any questions so far today. Do you have any thoughts or reflections about the conversation that we've had at this table?
I've had many thoughts. Yes, ma'am, just cut me off when you will. I won't remember the time, but these problems are not new. These are problems that have been occurring 20 years ago. I watched, I listened, and I recognize these are all the same problems that I was dealing with 20 years ago. And I mean, the amplification of the problems, of course, is true. Who can deny we want to protect all of our children? But I think at more of a foundational level, I think that whatever legislation is passed today is out of date tomorrow. We're dealing with a difficult problem that is, and put it a different way, traditional institutions move linearly. We know how it works, one thing after another after another. Internet moves exponentially, and that's going to make it very, very hard to keep up. And, I have many thoughts, but the one thought that I think is important is that any legislation that's created has to be dynamic. It can't be static. The space moves so fast at warp speed. We won't be able to keep up to it. I think I can guarantee that. And we have to think, I think, through that frame or through that lens. It's a whole different perspective when it comes to legislating. It's new. I think static legislation will fail. And I even have my doubts if dynamic legislation can fail, because that space moves so fast. And I think we do have to figure something out to protect the children, of course. I have many other thoughts about this. I don't do studies, and I value studies, of course. But I have firsthand experience for near 30 years. I've had many intimate discussions through restorative circles. I've been in so many offices with parents and kids and bullying, and these are all, they're not new. They're not new at all. I know the patterns. And I'll
extend this invitation to all the witnesses that were at committee today. We would like to hear any other thoughts that you have that maybe you didn't have a chance to express. An email through the clerk, and anything maybe you forgot to say, any other information you may have to us, we can use that information. The analysts will use it as we prepare our study in the new year. That is all the time we have for today, but I truly appreciate your participation. And once again, please send us any final thoughts that you have. Thank you. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting. And Merry Christmas, everyone.